Hi everyone. Takunda here. Sorry for the slight delay. We're trying to set up and finish off meetings that we're having in the space. So today's webinar is basically going to be about founders' vision, about how a startup should be able to survive the first public um, interaction, right? So that's already making noise. The reason why we're having this webinar right now is because a good number of the startups that we're working with are now at a point where you just went through the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair. You were talking to people, getting a lot of people who were excited about your business. And the challenge that you have is most of these people who come out to say, this is cool, this is great, usually have their own idea of what this should become. It's also based on the response that people were getting from pitch night as well. So you pitched to Blawayo, and people were thinking that nothing was happening, and so now you're coming up and they're like, whoa, where is this coming from? And so all these people are coming to you and saying, look, this is great, but why did you do it this way? Or they're actually coming in with resources. So we have startups that have just attempted to, so not attempted, but they just raised a bit of capital, but the funding had a lot of terms to it. So these investors were coming in and saying, look, we're coming in, but you need to start doing things in this direction, or we need to take the business in that direction. Now, we're not saying as founders you shouldn't listen to people. I mean, everything that you do up until that point where you actually officially launch your business has to be rooted in talking to users, to potential customers, and getting these people telling you what they might want to use, what their pain is, and all of that. And that listening and understanding what's going on in the market should not stop, right? Everything that you do has to be driven by data. And so when people come and start making these suggestions, it's because sometimes they might have seen something that you haven't seen. And so it's important to listen to them and understand where their ideology or their mentality is coming from. But at the same time, a good number of them suffer from this need to bring some sort of value to the table. They want to be experts in doing whatever they're willing to contribute. Become valuable, they're able to take advantage of that to get whatever they want. And as a founder, that becomes very, very difficult. And so that's sort of what we want to talk about. And I know at the beginning, when you start up, you talk about understand, sort of looking at your problem and why you want to solve it. And when you're building your deck, you talk about why now, and when you're pitching, you talk about how this has either affected you personally, or there was a problem that you felt passionately about and you were trying to solve that, which is great and fine. But once you are interacting with the public, you sort of have to reevaluate this vision, because you've gone through a lot. You've probably gone through iterations. You've changed what you initially thought based on the data that you were getting. So it's important to look at everything and say, what really am I trying to do? Where can we take this to, given the information that I now have, given the knowledge that I now have, given what I think it can become. So it's important to really look back at that vision. And I think when you go into most of these companies out there, they have this vision displayed on the door or on the wall or on the notice board. Half the time I don't read those, because it really sounds like a bunch of nice sounding words that we just put together to make the company look good. I think this is the process through which you start trying to distill that into an actual vision, right? And it's the one thing that's also going to set the tone for your culture in your startup as it strives to become a business. So what you believe in, what you're trying to chase towards, becomes a guiding principle for when you're trying to recruit your first employee and your first 10 employees, because you're going to need them to buy into this vision. You're going to need them to understand why you're doing this and why it is important that they get into your train, onto your work, whether you're paying them or not. So it becomes something that is very, very important, right? Just allow me to share something here. Sorry. So, all right. So we're going to do this way, right? So it's sort of kind of like this, right? So you were the guys who started off here, and it was hard, and you're working, and you're trying to get the product out there, and you're probably working towards some very big and great event. So whether it's a pitch event, whether you have been selected for Demo Africa or whatever it is, right? This is the one thing that you're working towards. And so you're like these guys, right? So you start saying, you can see the horizon, you're getting there, right? And that's the startup summit. But soon after that, you see over that growth stage, a lot of your startups then die because either they get distracted, either they start chasing funding, or they get some huge potential customer who then takes them away from the actual business that they wanted to grow in the first place. And that's where most of these people die. And so as you can see, there are all these weirdly scary skeletons that are just at the beginning of the growth stage. And I think that the lack of vision, the lack of having that clear understanding of why you want to do something and where you want it to go to, that's one of the things that kills startups at that growth stage. Of course, there are other factors and things like that, right? And it's worse because when you start talking to people, the question that they ask is, how big is this how big is this whole platform going to get, right? And what does success look like, right? And what's your world domination plan? And these are some of the questions that your investors will start asking you. And all this time you had been focusing on getting to your first 10 customers, or actually getting the product on the market, or you now have an app and just so excited because you literally can see the product now. You've translated the idea into a tangible product that has got a price tag to it, and people are actually paying you for this. People who are complimenting you and telling you that, oh my God, this is so cool. I want to buy it, and this is going to change the world, and all of that, right? And so when you start being asked these questions, it sort of takes you aback, because now it makes you feel like, look, I don't even understand, why they're asking these questions. I know how big how big this cake is going to be, but they're telling you that the cake is not as big. Like the cake is relatively small. It's a challenge and all of that. So these are some of the questions that you need to start thinking about and considering, and trying to articulate as you look at this. And now going to how you should start thinking about this just now. You should essentially start asking yourself the exact same questions, right? But phrasing them slightly differently. And this is how I think you should be able to do that. So how does this get big question? I think it's an empirical question, but it's daunting when you start to look at it from where you are going forward. Instead, I prefer that you look at this question, or this whole thing, as where do you want to be in the next, say, year, right? So you already know what you have right now. Maybe you have a functional app, maybe you have your first 100 customers, or whatever it is. But disregard what you have right now and think about where you want this to be in a year, not in 5 years, not in 2 years, in just one simple year, right? And so you start putting this down in quantifiable units. So you're not saying, look, we have many customers. You have, 1,000 customers, or you have 2,000 customers. You have X number of suppliers. You're operating in Y number of cities. So you're painting a picture in broad strokes, but those strokes have to be vivid. They have to have color to them. They have to be quantifiable in some way, right? And then once you do that, right, you then start looking at, okay, so if that's in a year, and you see, when you're looking at your in a year perspective, feel free to think outside the box. So you might be building a business that does X, right, or that sells smoothies, right? But think about how, instead of selling smoothies, you might actually start selling dried fruit, and because maybe you're actually processing excess fruit that's not bought per day into the dried fruit. So it's not that you're a dried fruit company, you're not into preservation of fruit, but in a year's time you might be doing that, right? Even though right now you haven't started doing anything in particular to start going in that direction. This is the part where you feel free to go crazy about what this might become. You remember when you're starting with your idea, the whole principle was, yes, you want to conquer the world, but right now let's build something that's functional, that can get to the market and can actually get people to start using it. So at this point, you're now looking at, yes, I have this functional thing, but what do I want it to become, right? And then you take that down to your 3 months to say, okay, I get what I want to have in a year, right? What do I want to have achieved in the next 3 months? So you're looking at where this product should get to, and you're trying to refine those broad brush strokes into more visible, more attainable units and things that can easily be correlated to what you have right now, right? And in so doing, this is how you sort of start defining what success might be for you right now, or what it might look like right now, and what it might look like in 3 months and in a year. Your success in itself it's not a destination per se. It's the constant attaining of a particular or a desired goal. right? And so as you continue attaining that, right, you continue being successful. You don't arrive at success and then lo and behold, this is where I'm now existing, right? And so that process of setting those steps up towards that is what a success plan should be like. And then, the last question, what's your world domination plan? So naturally, most of us start businesses and startups because we want to cure cancer or make the world a better place. That's usually what everyone talks about, right? You have to contextualize what that means to you. So for some, having 1 billion users is world domination. For others, having 7 billion users is world domination, right? And for other people, moving the needle, so making things cheaper by 10% is world domination. So you need to understand what success and what having attained that level of success over time looks like to you. Because an investor might feel like, look, you're in Zimbabwe, having 2 million users isn't very big. It's not as exciting on a global perspective, right? But if you're having 2 million users out of a country with 14 million, then I think that in itself it's a feat that's very difficult to attain, and it's something that is worth being able to celebrate. So as opposed to trying to compare what you're doing to other people in your industry globally or in different industries, you should contextualize what you're trying to achieve. And again, it doesn't mean that once you get there, you rest and you sort of stop doing things. It means you continue going forward in that way. And I think the other reason why having or understanding what your vision is because a good number of these external people that you're interfacing with right now don't understand what startups are. So most of you people think startups are a smaller version of a business, right? Which is not true. Later on, we'll talk about how to translate a startup or the transition of a startup into an actual business, right? And so that's the one thing that they need to be able to understand. So here you have this interesting illustration of death, essentially. So that's how we usually depict death, maybe in a bit more clarity, right? But you have this entity, right? And you have this person who's looking slightly shaken, who's saying, for me, it's not just a job, right? It's a way of life. And this is one of the things that some of your investors, some of your business leaders don't understand. They still look at your startup and they're trying to contextualize its performance based on business metrics, right? Which is important for you to achieve. I mean, you're beginning to transition out of the fairyland where anything and everything is possible, and you're now trying to define what the value that you've created is and what percentage of that value you've captured. So you need to look at it that way. And getting them to understand that is the tricky part. The best way to do that is to have and show that you know what you have right now and where you want it to go and how to take it there. Yes, they're going to bring in more expertise to say, look, based on our experience, this and this works and that and this doesn't. But you need to be able to show that you know exactly what you're trying to build and where it's supposed to go. A lot of people talk about this whole stand for something or fall for everything, right? So as a founder, instead of, whilst you're getting excited about, having reached the startup summit, right? Always understand that that is the beginning of the actual journey, right? You have gotten to the startup summit, and now you might be working on translating that startup, which is, this entity that's created to search for sustainable business model into an actual business, right? Which is now scaling that business model to attain more value and capture a larger percentage of the market. So as you're doing that, take what you want to build in the future into account. People need to be able to buy into that because that's what will sort of set the tone and the direction for your startup. If you don't define this clearly in your brain, then you're always going to be reacting to people. So, from my own experience, right? From my own experience, so I sort of went through this through one or two of the startups that I started working on early on, where we got a lot of attention, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is so great! You guys are doing some cool stuff." And you'd get people coming to you and say, "Oh, so you're raising $500,000, great! I'll totally commit to that. I believe in what you guys are trying to do, but instead of doing it for X, let's do it for Y, right?" And some of these, look, it's not like it's an ulterior motive per se. For some of them, yes, it is. For others, it's just that that's what they do, right? So some of these people are, non-profits, right? So they're all about social gain and social benefit. And so whilst you might be creating technology that's supposed to make money, and make the world a better place, in quotes, they might want to instead focus on the making of the world a better place. And so you need to be able to ask yourself to say, with regards to the vision that I was trying to build in the beginning, does working with this person align with that vision? And a good number of times it doesn't. And so that should then become your guiding principle to say, who or what kind of investor do I look for? What kind of advisor do I look for? And how do I treat these varying uh, points of view, right? Sometimes, as I had said before, they are valuable, so you need to listen, but always compare them against what you have wanted to build, especially when there is data. And that's the reason why we always talk about needing it to be driven by some sort of data. So looking at it and saying, so their opinion, what is fueling it? Is it that they have experience in this field? Is it because they have seen something that I haven't seen? And given that, should they then modify what I'm trying to build towards a particular direction or not? That's sort of, what is important in terms of trying to build your vision and trying to translate it. Probably a bit later on, we'll talk about some of the tools that we can use. We designed a road mapping tool some time back, and that's something that's very easy to use, especially when you're now working on your 3-month vision to say, what do I want to achieve in 3 months? And then you break that down into what do I want to achieve this month, and then what are the missions to be undertaken, what are the tasks to be executed, and how am I doing that over a period of time, right? Because this whole vision exercise, sometimes it's daunting, and it's also sort of a source of anxiety and depression, because now you feel like, look, I've actually started something, but now it looks like what I need to still do is way more than what I have done. Instead, I've literally bent over backwards to just get to where I am right now. So breaking it into smaller time periods sort of makes it easier to deal with and easier to manage. But that's sort of the brief on the whole issue to do with founder's vision. A lot of us get buried in the excitement. It's always important to reflect on what you're doing and see how that applies to the greater scope of what you're trying to build. The whole argument to do with what's urgent versus what's important really comes into play at this point, where you have a lot of external force. You have people even within your team that are coming up with different ideas and different ways that things should happen. So how do you deal with that? How do you discern between what's just urgent right now when somebody's just trying to put pressure on you doing something, and what is actually important and contributing towards your vision? So before we stop this whole webinar, feel free to send through questions. Most of these webinars, as we do them, are sort of introductions to conversations to get people to start thinking about certain things, and then we then go through actual activities to say, how do you build a vision, how do you distill it, and then how do you communicate it across your culture, through your documentation, through the impression that your startup gives. And that stuff, it's always best to do it via practice and through actually doing it. So this might be through hives or through different activities that are in the communities within here. So before we end the conversation, we'll have Mike, who's been featuring on a good number of these webinars. Hopefully he'll do this soon, to talk about what he thinks about this whole vision issue. All right.
So hi everyone. I wanted to comment a bit on what TechVillage just said about the vision and how it contributes to you being a founder and into your startup. So I found that most of the time when things get really bad, the one thing that you can look back on is your vision, because that's what really, it's sort of like the assurance of what you want to do and what's it. Sort of like, right, if we were to look at it in biblical terms, it would be faith, because that's essentially the substance of your startup, which is not yet there, because you're the one who can see that in so many years, I want to be able to do this, and my startup will be performing in such a way. So your vision is what really gives you that picture. And in spite of what you might hear from many people, for example, you go to investor meetings and you're told your figures are low and things like that, and it will happen a good number of times. So your vision will then tell you that, no, where this is going and where I see this, it's not worth what people are offering me and things like that. So that's what will essentially help you to make some of those decisions, because you can see a picture that other people cannot see. And it will also help you to be able to share with other people where exactly your things are going, and it helps you sort of like lead the team in the direction that you want to go. Because if everyone can see that picture, everyone will be able to comprehend and to work towards the common goal. So yeah, it's very important that you are clear of exactly what you want to achieve, what it's going to be in on the long term, and so that you don't make rash decisions and unnecessary sacrifices, which will get in the way of your vision. So that's just basically what I wanted to share.
Awesome. So yeah, that's it's an interesting perspective. I think before we close, the last thing is, we talk about how ideas cannot be stolen, right? And one of the arguments behind that is because only you, the founder, knows why you started working on something, and you know what sort of opportunities you're trying to take advantage of, and you know what you're working on right now, what it's supposed to translate into, or what sort of opportunity it then creates that you want to then take advantage of to create the actual, ultimate company that you wanted to build. And I think constantly looking at that vision sort of serves to remind you, such that once you talk about, look, I'm building a meal delivery app, and then in 2 weeks you have 4 of them on the market. What will help you survive and weather through all of that is knowing why you wanted to build this in the first place, knowing what your key value points were, instead of then now just reacting to the immediate competition to say, well, these guys, the prices are lower, so let me also try and lower my prices, and these guys are delivering everywhere, so let me now try and deliver everywhere. And you end up in this situation where you burn out because you are scaling too fast in directions that you had planned for in the beginning. So it keeps you rooted in the cause, the thing that got you to start up in the first place. I think that's the other thing that you should keep in mind. So remember, it's always important to ask yourself, those important questions. So how does this get big, and how big does this get? What does success look like to me? And what's my world domination plan? So how am I getting to that level of success over a 1 month period, over a 3 month period? And it's always best for you to work from the long term backwards, because that way you don't sort of narrow your vision towards what you have right now, but also keep yourself dynamic enough to look at what it might become, in the future, and how to translate you now into that future. And that's the reason why it's also important to have all your different versions of your business model canvas available, because you can look at what you were trying to do when you started, right? And then how it's been morphing and getting narrower and more focused up until you launch. And then now you're trying to scale it. And so you need to be going back to that original vision that you had in your very first sort of canvas. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope this helped. Let's have more conversations. You can email or start a hive, or say anything, or comment in any of the new communities and the groups about this and what you think about them, or even do your own webinar talking about what you think, what your response might be towards this whole issue to do with Founders Vision. Thanks.